Rogue Record.
What's up, everybody? You're listening to Hustle Makes It Happen, a podcast about the grit, the determination, and the mindset it takes to become a winner. Success is not an accident. It lives outside your comfort zone, in the trenches, where excuses are met by brick walls. So strap in, tighten up, and let's get ready to hustle. What's up, hustlers? Welcome to another episode of Hustle Makes It Happen, the podcast.
And Merry Christmas to everybody. We're recording this episode on the day after Christmas. So if we didn't talk to you in person or on the phone or on social media or whatever, you're going to hear it now. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, we don't know when that's going to air, but
yeah, that's right.
Get back into the spirit. So with that, before we break off into our guest today, we're going to do all the cool stuff that we like to talk about. Not really. Listen, you guys are the reason that we're here. We say it every time. Plug us, share us, send it to the next guy, or talk about it organically in conversations that you're having. If you're getting value out of here, leave us a 5-star review, hit the bell notification to subscribe on all platforms. I recently had a little run-in at a wrestling meet for my son, and an individual sat next to me and literally said, "Man, I've listened to every one of your episodes," and I got goosebumps when I did that. It's an individual I don't know, never seen before in my life, and he looked at me when we were talking about wrestling with our kids, because his kids just started wrestling as well, and he said, "Man, I've listened to every episode you guys have put out," and I'm like, man, that makes me want to keep doing this.
That's right, man. And look, we talk a lot about the fact that, sometimes people, don't want to listen to, not, Alyssa said it, and we say it all the time, not every podcast is for everybody, but the people that are getting value out of the show are genuinely taking things from the show and applying them to their lives. And that has been the most profound thing for me, right? Whenever you talk to random strangers that are getting value out of the show, that's why we do this, guys. So please just continue. If you're getting value out of the show, continue to spread the word and share it with other people. And let's try to help as many people as we can. I mean, that's the goal.
Yep, that's it.
Right? We're telling the story of everyday people that are crushing the game and winning at life in whatever niche they're in. So that's applicable to literally everybody that wants to improve themselves.
And today we have a special one, man. We're breaking off into another lane we've never talked about, Mr. Paul Corville.
Well said. Thanks.
Or Mr. J.P.
J.P. is fine with me. Chase,
Yeah,
Justin, good to be here with you.
No, man, it's awesome. I'm really, really looking forward to this, because this is another avenue of mental mindset that we don't talk about a lot. We haven't talked about it at all, actually. That's why I'm so excited about this episode. We talk about the grind and the hustle as it's related to, growing business or self-improvement or things like that. But what I think the core, and I don't know, because whatever happens, what happens in this room is totally a surprise every time we sit in here. But where I think this is going to go is we're going to talk about clarity and freedom. And that's what I'm the most excited about. Just on the little bit of back research that I've done on you and your story, I think you're going to be able to tell our guest what it means to truly be happy and fulfilled and free in your life. And I can't wait to dig off into that.
Yeah, me too. Maybe I'll learn something as well.
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
It happens sometimes, man.
Yeah.
So just JP, you can break off just a little bit to give our viewers and listeners just a little backstory of why you're here today, how you came to be on the show, and a little bit about yourself.
Sure, appreciate it, Chase. Again, Merry Christmas to both of you as well.
Thank you.
So I grew up here in Denham Springs, Louisiana. I graduated from the high school here, and I joined the Marine Corps in 1991. I served 22 years. I retired in 2013. Had a very successful career. There's a lot of story and details that happened in that 22 years that I couldn't even begin to expound upon. It's not to be egotistical. It's just the way the career is and how much you put into that and what's happened in that time frame. But after I retired in 2013, I went through a divorce. And then I was hired as a contractor in the United Arab Emirates overseas, so around Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And I had a wonderful career for 7 years as a contractor training their military. And in that time frame, I took advantage of where I lived, and I traveled extensively on my own to so many different countries and very adventurous. So when I say I traveled, I'm not the type of person that likes to just go to a beach for a week and sit around. I can do that for a few hours or maybe a day. I was more about adventure and experience and culture and cuisine and landscape. That was my big thing. It was a therapeutic outlet for me. And then 2 years ago, after the COVID situation happened overseas, a lot of the departments where I worked were closed down. And I, unfortunately and fortunately, was in a department that was closed. And beauty always comes out of some decisions that are not made for you, by yourself. It's made by someone else, right? And so the last 2 years, I found myself almost very nomadic. I traveled and lived in some tropical islands with a girlfriend I had at the time. Then I went to the United Kingdom, and I lived in England, traveled all over the UK, worked there for a while, like at horse stables, while my girlfriend had a career. But then we eventually split. And when we split, I came back to the United States, and I decided one day, what am I going to do? I don't know if I want to go back to work at the moment. I invested right. Let me hike the Appalachian Trail. It's something that had been kind of in my mind for the last 2 years. It wasn't a bucket list all of my life, but the last 2 years I had it in the back of my head. And quite honestly, it was a challenge, 6 months. Who has 6 months devoted in their life to not work and to go and hike and live outdoors and go from Georgia to Maine on foot? So the more I thought of it that way, the more I wanted to do it. So I did it this year. And then I just finished in late September, and here I am now, and I'm
in one piece.
In one piece, in a beautiful place in life, figuring out what the next chapter is going to be, and I got options. So
I read, I did some digging, and the aha moment for you when you were about to do this is you were visiting a friend.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
And she made you put it in the universe, right?
She did.
She did, and that was that was the flip of the switch for you, right?
It was. I was afraid to announce it out loud. A lot of friends of mine were asking me, "What are you going to do now?" And I would commonly say, "I'm looking for employment, or I might hike the Appalachian Trail. I'm not really sure." And in my mind, I knew I wanted to do the trail, but if I said it out loud, then I was accountable.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
And so my friend Chris Morrell, and this is not to brag, a wonderful woman. She's an actress, former bodybuilder, professional bodybuilder. If you've ever seen Grown Ups 2 with Adam Sandler, and she's the bodybuilder that David Spade was in all over, and she dressed like Hulk Hogan at the end in a Halloween costume. I was having a dinner with her in Dallas-Fort Worth, and she's like, "JP, it sounds like you already made up your mind. Just quit stalling and say it out loud." And I was like, "You're right." So a few days later, I announced it to my friends and my family that I was going to do it. And I was held accountable, but I held myself accountable. And then literally the way I'm designed now as an adult is once I made that decision out loud, then all of the steps start falling in place with my gear, my planning, my preparation, my mindset. Everything was focused on now accomplishing this task.
Man, that's super powerful. Where did the mindset, because it takes a lot of mental fortitude to do some of the things that you've already just recently talked about, right?
Yeah.
Was a lot of that conditioned in you, like throughout the years, in your 22 years? Like, did it grow? Did it start when you were younger? Was it put into you by your mom, dad, uncle? Did it happen through high school? Did it come over the course of your career?
That's a great question, Chase. I think it's that common question: are leaders born or are we made? Right? Yeah. And everyone has a different answer. But from the time we're born, the people that we're introduced to, our mother, our father, friends, family, you're being developed. Somebody's influencing you, good or bad. We have a common saying in the Marine Corps: you have two bags on each shoulder. One has all your good leaders that influence you. One has all your bad leaders. And sometimes the bag with the bad leaders is heavier than the one with the good, but you learn and take something from them. So, I think I was conditioned over the years. So I graduated here from Denham Springs High School. I was a very shy child, very shy. I was overweight. And this goes back to your question about how I think I started to kind of develop this mindset, which got me through my adult years. And it took some slow time. I was like a slow cook, a slow burner right on the stove. When I was 13, I was grossly overweight, shy. My hair was longer than most of the guys in school. I was very timid. I played football in junior high. I played football in high school at freshman level. I didn't start. I was too shy. Every time we had drills at football practice and people would watch me, like the coaches, I did not perform well because I was always afraid I was being criticized. So that was what I had going for me. It was 1985, and my father took me to see 2 movies that year that changed my life. And it was Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Rocky 4 with Sylvester Stallone. And I remember just thinking to myself, I want to look like that. I want to be that type of man. I want to be fit. I want to be healthy. I want to be confident. And those movie characters really did something to me. My father wouldn't give me a gym membership because at 13, I changed my mind each week of what I wanted to do, right?
Right.
So he's like, I'm not going to put money and invest into a monthly plan and you're going to give up on it after a week. So he had a bunch of weights, and we had this old shed out back. It had no floor. It was just on the ground, right? So it was the dirt. It was an A-frame. He said, I'm going to put all the weights in here. I have a punching bag. I'll set something up. Show me you're dedicated. And to make a long story short, 3 months later during the 8th grade year to 9th grade, so Southside Junior High is where I went, and then Denham Springs Junior High, they both merged into Denham Springs High School at the time, right? So you had people that were in school with you that you knew and people you didn't know. So from 8th grade to 9th grade, that 3-month period, remember, no social media, no internet. The only way we stayed in contact with each other was a phone call, which I didn't really do very much of except my close friends. I lost 30 pounds, cut my hair short, and got a suntan. And no one recognized me when I went to 9th grade. And I was at the locker, and our lockers were in alphabetical order. So there was a guy that I knew real well, and he introduced himself to me, and I was like, you know who I am? He's like, no, I don't. Told him my name. He couldn't believe it. So he asked me, how did I change myself? So I explained to him what I had done, but I made a comment about how much I bench pressed, and he didn't believe me. He thought I was full of it. So apparently the word spread around school that day that I had fibbed and lied and said I'd bench pressed 205 pounds or something like that. I think it was 185 at 13. So I tried out for freshman football, and we went to the field house. And the way they had it designed back then is you'd show up the first day, and they would take everybody's name, and they would look at your size, and they'd say, okay, you're a linebacker or you're a running back, and they'd put you in this category. Then you'd have to do a max bench press, max squats, and I think power cleans is what we had to do over 3 days.
Yeah, the dick measuring contest.
Exactly what it was. That's exactly what it was. So I was very confident, but I was still shy, even though I had lost all this weight. So they called my name for the bench press, and they started putting the weight on the bar, and I was bench pressing pretty well at that age. And somebody yelled out in the background, 185, because I had bragged about repping 185. So when they put the weights on the bar, I remember being a little bit nervous because I thought, okay, these are Olympic style weights, and I have weights that are mixed at home of Olympic style and then those old plastic concrete ones that you fill with concrete. Yep. So then my brain is starting to like deceive me. I'm thinking, oh my God, what if I didn't do 185 and it was in my mind, but it's not actually 185? Long story short, I ended up doing 205 pounds for the max bench press. Like no one was even near me. So the next day I go from being the shy kid to the talk of the school, and my head got huge and my confidence got, boosted. But there's a downside, and this goes back to your question again, Chase. What goes up must come down. The next, I think 2 days later, we had to go back in, and now they wanted us to max our squats. Now, I didn't do squats in that shed. I did leg extensions, and I felt like, hey, my legs are stronger than my arms. I surely can squat as much as I bench press. So when they called my name and I got in the squat rack, everybody was watching to see what I could do now. And I said, well, let me just go with 205. That's what I bench press. Let me start with that. I got off the rack and I dropped and fell down. Couldn't even hold it up when I squatted down. And we started taking the weights off to now I think it was 135, and my legs were shaking. Anxiety is hitting me. Everyone's staring at me, and I was shy. So I didn't know how to deal with that. And then I heard laughter, and I crumbled. So I went from the talk of the town for 2 days in school about being the strong guy to now this laughing stock. And the reason I shared that story is that was a lesson that I never forget, because I've repeated that lesson, maybe not the same thing with the bench press,
right.
But that lesson has happened to me in my career numerous times where I've fallen after being at the top, and I was embarrassed. And how do I dig myself out? And what I learned from all of that, and this goes to the Appalachian Trail, making that decision, is we learn so much more when we face adversity. When we're in comfort, it's nice, but we don't learn anything about ourselves in comfort. We have to face adversity. And anytime I've faced adversity and I've struggled and I've been miserable in situations, I've always learned and grown out of it, and I can apply it to later situations. So that's what I took from that. What can I use from that lesson at 13 that is applicable at 50 years old? And that's what I do.
I think the lesson there is like not letting, as a shy kid, right, or as somebody that's influenced by other people's perception of them, and I think a lot of people share that. I know I certainly do. What folks like us learn from those lessons is to never let that happen again, right? Because you hate that feeling.
Absolutely.
And that's really applicable for our audience, is that a lot of people are afraid to do something because they're afraid they're going to fail. But where the real switch comes in, where the self-improvement can be brought out of failure, isn't just not letting it happen again, right?
Absolutely.
Chase tells a story often. We've told it on the podcast a couple of times, but I don't know, 6 months or so ago, we were really heavily focused on the podcast, and we had let some pretty important things in our normal business kind of slip a little bit. And whenever they slipped, some balls got dropped, and some people were upset, and it was influencing people's perception of us and our company. And I remember Chase called me, and he's like, I'm fixing this problem, this immediate, like the fire that's in front of us, I'm going to put it out. And he said to me, this will never happen again. Because, it was one of those things where it wasn't a catastrophic failure, right? But it had made us not look the best, right? And Chase took that lesson, and he said, this is what happened. We confronted it, and he said, this will never happen to us again. And it hasn't since. But the real growth, I think, the personal growth piece of that comes from understanding that there's going to be failures in life, but then when you fail, just understand what caused you to fail and don't let it happen again, right? And then you can take that and apply that to every situation. I mean, you learned that lesson at 13, right? You got embarrassed and you said, this is never going to happen to me again. And then you took that into the next obstacle, and whenever you failed at that, you said, all right, well, this is how I failed. Maybe you weren't embarrassed, but I'm sure we'll get into some stories whenever you were in the Marine Corps. And like, I know the leadership challenge that comes along with military leadership, there was probably some failures there, and you just said, this will never happen again. Oh, yes. And you improve, and you say, this will never happen again. So personal growth is an iterative process, and I think that's what a lot of people have trouble grasping.
Yes, very valuable, Justin. Well said.
I think, you learn that, I guess because I'm trying to be on the forefront of this because I'm more cognizant now as an adult. Do you think that putting our kids, do you have kids?
I do. I have 4.
So I'm purposely today putting my kids in things that failures, it's evident. Like, and I don't tell them that, but I know that there's going to be moments that they're going to fail, and I want to see how they come out of that. I feel like a lot of people, they shy away from that now as parents. Like, we're coddling that sense of failure. Like my son, he wrestled last year. He got skull dragged at his first meet. I mean, just his ass wiped all over the floor. Full-blown panic attack, but he finished the year out, got stronger over this off season, and he's excited about going back this year, and he's back in it, right, as of 2 weeks ago.
That's great.
Like my daughter, same thing. I put her in situations that she's failed in, but I don't let her say, like, I failed that day, I'm going to quit, right? Do you feel that today people are pulling themselves away from that? Can you see that?
Hey, y'all, if you're in the market for a real estate attorney that can handle all your title work needs, all your closing needs, all your succession needs, whatever your needs are in the real estate industry, look no further than our friends Shay Landry and the group at Milestone Title. Y'all, we use these guys for our personal business, and they have never let us down. They've been on top of the game every time we've used them. So whatever it is that you're looking for in the real estate industry, as far as a closing attorney or title work is concerned, check out our friends over at Milestone Title. Milestone Title, a proud sponsor of Hustle Makes It Happen, the podcast.
I know a lot of people that don't push away from that, like you just described as a parent. And unfortunately, my relationship with my children is distant. They live in California, so I don't have the influence daily. But one thing that I've always believed in and I respond to is leadership by example. And it's a common thing that we use in the military. but to see it is to believe it. And I find that if I can show by my example, facing adversity and continuing, because I think as a young man or a young woman, when you are told by someone that lectures you, hey, this is what I did when I was your age, but they don't see you doing anything like that now, it's hard for them to really feel inspired. But if they see that you continue to show that you're trying to make progress and growth and you're putting yourself in faces to maybe fail but succeed as well, that's leadership by example. It's influence, and I think that's a powerful thing.
You have hiked for the last 6 months of this year, a part of 6 months of this year.
Right.
What was your ultimate goal coming out of that for you? Like, what were your expectations mentally? Like, going in, you knew it was going to be hard. You knew it was going to be long and daunting, but exhilarating, right? You knew that too, being that you've traveled so much. Like, what did you want coming out of it on the forefront?
Was it? Yeah. I want to add on to that question because I want to steer where the outcome comes. Was there an end goal, or was it just about the walk?
That's a great question. You know, this is going to sound very cliche, but one thing I've learned that I definitely applied on that trail was I didn't have an end goal. It was about the journey, not the destination. And again, it sounds cliche, like I'm reading a bumper sticker, but I've seen that meme. I've seen that quote so many times in life. I failed at that miserably. I always was accused of, man, you always rush to get to the end of everything you do, and you don't enjoy it. Yeah, you both know what I'm talking about. You look at each other. You relate.
I framed that question like that exactly to get that response.
Did you?
Yeah.
And look, let's be honest. You didn't tell me that before we walked in here. It wasn't scripted.
So the reason why we ask that question or that we steer things that way is because some people that sit in that seat, right, and they're not travelers, but it's universal over what they're doing.
Yes.
And we asked the question, and it was, is it about the journey, or is it about what happened at the end, or what you came out of the end? And yours is more geared toward me.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to know now in these past couple of years of life, I'm starting to just sit back and enjoy what I'm going through,
right,
whether it's the failure and the successes in the ride. And Justin, it's been hardwired for him for a long time that he's really focused on the end goal.
Yes.
But that's hardwired in us, and
sure,
learning to navigate that and grow in different ways. But
I attribute a lot of that to the military too. And I think we're all going to be able to relate because you're more removed from the military than both of us are. I'm still in. You got out in 2013. Yeah, you got out in 2009, right? 2006. So he's further removed from the military than I am. But in the military, it's just about executing an objective, right? Nothing else matters. How you get there, it doesn't matter. What happens on the way, it doesn't matter. What matters is the outcome, right?
Right.
So as leaders in the military, we're hardwired. I think we're molded to focus on the outcome and not everything else that comes along with it. So that's been a challenge for me personally to break. And it sounds like until you hiked the trail, it was a challenge for you too, because you said that you usually are focused on the end state, right? You had usually been focused on the end state. Yeah. But what's something as profound, I guess, is the word that I want to pick, profound as hiking the Appalachian Trail. It's awesome that you started it with no real expectations of what the end would look like or what it would feel like or what it would do to you mentally. You just took the step and got started. Yep. And then you had 6 months to start painting the picture of what the end would look like, right? And I'm sure it changed over and over again, but I'm sure what you thought the end would look like on day one looked a whole lot different than what the end looked like on day 90.
Very much so.
You know what I mean?
I do, very much. And I've said this quite a bit, and it was a romantic charm that got me through the Appalachian Trail, because in that 6 month period, you go through every emotion you can imagine. You go through excitement, joy, but you go through misery, and you go through, why am I doing this again? Do I really want to do this? Because the reality sets in when you start going through the elements, the changes of the snow, the heat, the bugs, all of these things that are adverse conditions, and you think, why am I doing this, right? And I go back to always thinking of what I started with, and it was this simple for me. I was like, I had an infatuation as a young man with Western movies and cowboys and the Wild West. And so the thought of a cowboy taking his horse with his saddlebags, going into the backcountry, completely remote for days and weeks, camping, making his own food, and then going into a town, hitting a saloon, getting a drink, getting a bath, meeting a local lady, and then getting back on the horse and going back in the backcountry before the law can catch him to another town. That's how I got through it. It just, I didn't have a horse. I was carrying the gear. And believe it or not, every time I did that, it inspired and motivated me, thinking, man, this is really like going back in time. That's what it felt like. It felt like I was going back in time. And, I say this as humbling as I can. I consider myself a regular person. A regular man, right? I get accused of the things that I've done, of being like an adrenaline junkie or a danger seeker. I'm not at all. I just enjoy adventure. I enjoy challenges. And the people that I met on the trail from every age, right? The demographic for me of the people that I did meet were usually early 20s, like right out of college. And before they started their career, they did this. Or 65 and older, fully retired. Now they had time to do it. That was typically the demographic. But what inspired me is some of the young men and women that I would meet that had never done anything adverse. They had graduated high school, they had some jobs, they went to college, and then they did this trail, never backpacked before, and they finished it, and they finished it quickly, and they were so strong mentally, not just physically. That impressed me. Like, you asked me a question, was I conditioned for it? It took me years. Even after I joined the Marine Corps, I always tell people that I think I was 25 before I finally broke out of my shell. And that was after being in the Marine Corps 6 to 7 years already, before I felt like I was really who I am and I was confident in my own skin and comfortable and no shyness anymore. 25. And here I'm meeting these people, literally never had backpacked before. This young woman, she's like, I just decided I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail. And she did it. No preparation, no conditioning, no planning. Did she have moments of misery like anyone? Sure. But I go back to when I was probably 19. If I hadn't been in the Marine Corps and I had tried that, I don't think I would have made it. I think mentally I would have given up fast.
What is the normal time period that would take of someone if they were just like really getting it?
They say 4 to 6 months is the average time, depending on your budget, your time, and how much you want to get off the trail and take days off. They call it a 0 day in the hiker community. Like, I'm going to take a 0 tomorrow, which means a day off. I knew that I wanted to experience small town America, and I didn't want to rush through it. So I said 6 months is kind of what I was going to gauge. And I actually got hurt on the trail, and I had to take 7 days off at one point to rest and recover. And I actually finished 6 months to the day. And there were times where I'd go through a town. I mean, the most beautiful little quaint towns in America that you would never visit, right? Because a highway doesn't go through them that you would drive through. And I would spend a day or two off in that town going to the local pub. No franchises in most of these places. Some places did, but no franchises, mom and pop general stores, no taxis, no Ubers. You had to find like the 2 shuttle drivers in town that would bring you somewhere, and you pay them a small amount of money. And that is the type of town that I would say. And it was wonderful. Like I said, it was like going back in time.
That it's profound, man. Like the freedom that is attached to those statements.
Oh yeah.
I'm real curious about like the mental clarity that comes through 6 months of just immersing yourself in that type of experience. That's what I'm really, really interested in this talk. Like, what happens to you as you, because you had people on the trail with you, I'm sure, but the vast majority of that time was spent alone, I would imagine, right?
That's right, for me.
Yeah. So what is that like? What kind of clarity comes out of spending that much time alone in nature, just putting one foot in front of the other for months at a time?
Oh, it was amazing. It was the best therapy in the world. It was so cleansing. There was so much time to not only be clear in your thoughts, but to be alone and reflect on what you had done in the past, maybe where you were heading tomorrow. And I don't mean physically on the trail, but what was the decision I would make when I was done? How would I be accepted? And then you start to realize that you have friends and family that are following your journey, because I'm putting it on social media as I'm going through. But I started getting people that didn't know me that were following me too. And the things that they would tell me or ask me, and they would be inspired. And it really meant a lot to me. And I say this for probably 10 years now. I repeat it so much, so people that know me probably almost vomit when they hear me say it now. But I learned a long time ago there's a difference between motivation and inspiration. And I equate it to a cup of coffee. You can have a cup of coffee and you'll get a high from the caffeine, but eventually it dies down. That's what motivation is. But if you meet someone that inspires you, that lasts a lifetime. And if you've met anyone in your life that's been a mentor that's inspired you, they don't need to be in the room. You can probably think for a minute, what would this person do right now? What would they think of me if they saw me complaining or if they saw me succeeding? And usually you already know the answer because that person inspired you. And there's a big difference in that. So when people are telling me, hey, I'm following you, you inspired me. I didn't even know what the Appalachian Trail was. I don't think I can do the whole thing, but I'm going to go hike. I'm going to go on a section. I have a bad back. The doctor told me to exercise, and I didn't want to do anything with it because I don't like to exercise. I can't run. I can't walk. But you know what? I went out and did a 3-mile hike in the woods the other day on a trail, and I feel fantastic. And I got outdoors. I didn't wear headphones. I listened to the sounds of nature. So those things like are great. And on the Appalachian Trail, I had so much of that. So you can camp at shelters, and a shelter is just a structure with 3 sides and a roof, right? So you can get out of the rain. And a lot of times hikers would sleep together, like 12 or 14 in that shelter. There'd be people setting up their tents around the shelter, and there'd be a community at night. So some hikers didn't hike alone at all. And on the trail, they called themselves a tramley, a trail family. They'll have like 4 to 6, however many people they get together, and they're never alone. Some people thrive in community. For me, I don't. I thrive individually and I thrive solo. I had my moments where I camped in a shelter or around a shelter from time to time. Not many, but most of the time I was alone. And it was the most magical experiences. There's one spot for sure that always comes to my mind. I was in New Hampshire, beautiful state, very rugged terrain though. That was like when the terrain really got the most intense. And I would say out of 14 states that you actually hike through. So the Appalachian Trail is 14 states, 2,194 miles. Each year it changes a little bit because they close down certain trails to refurbish them and they have to make a detour so it can shorten or lengthen. But roughly it's 2,200 miles, somewhere around that area. I got into New Hampshire and I found this spot that had these waterfalls and these beautiful like rocks that were smooth, and I could lay out my gear to dry in the sun. Took a bath in the waterfall. There was like this perfect bath with the waterfall coming down and the sunset was coming down. I made my coffee, made my meal. It was quiet, heard the wildlife. The weather was perfect. It wasn't too hot or too cold at that point. And I had the most clear conscience. I remember taking some notes and just saying, hey, this is what I think I'm going to do when I get back. But I didn't want it to end. It goes back to I'm going to enjoy the journey, not the destination. Even though the goal in my head is like, I know I have to make it.
I can tell you can picture every
moment.
Like you can smell it, you can see it, you can feel how the rocks were.
That's right.
And it'll never leave you.
Never. I learned a long time ago, again, through trial and error, right? To embrace not only a moment, but almost as you said, the smell, the thoughts, the sight, the Kodak moment, as we used to say.
I got goosebumps thinking about this, man.
He actually does. I can see him. You might not see it on the camera, but I can see him here.
Yeah, man, that's super profound. I've done like little baby things comparative to what you're talking about, but I think the freedom that you're saying, it's a mental freedom. It's not. There's no.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I've been trying to dig out.
Yeah,
it's so much clarity.
It's a mental freedom that you're giving yourself, because with it comes, I can only imagine some of the negative thoughts that creeped in that time. When you had those moments when you're sitting on those rocks and this water's coming down, it made every bit of that journey up to that point feel like it was all meant to get you just to that spot right there with that feeling.
That's right. And when I was going back into the Marine Corps, unfortunately, some of the job requirements as you move up as a senior enlisted, right? I was a sergeant major when I retired. I would have to make visits to the brig and visit Marines who were incarcerated for whatever they might have done. And some of them were locked up for a while in the brig, right? And there was this one Marine that I was speaking with, combat veteran. I knew him pretty well. So we were having a conversation, and he's like, Sergeant Major, I read a book called The Hurricane. There was a movie made about it with Denzel Washington, right? And one thing that stood out to me in that book is that my body has to be here, but my mind does not have to be in prison. So I fantasize. I remember moments, the things that were beautiful in life, and I go back to that happy place. And it's, again, another cliche thing that we hear about, but once you can link into that and know what that is, it's a wonderful thing. And I found that on the trail numerous times, you know. And honestly, after completion of that trail, you're so ecstatic, so excited that you accomplished something so large, and the magnitude of that 6 months, 2,200 miles. It was ready to be done. But you read about post-trail depression, they call it. And I'm like, okay, I can buy into that. It hit me pretty hard about 6 weeks after I was done. You really become depressed. And some of the hikers I stay in touch with, they're having a hard time with it. For me, I know how to navigate through that depression because coming back from military deployments, it's very relatable. And
yeah, it's very similar.
Very similar.
Yep.
You come back and people are happy to see you. Think, hey, I'm glad to have you back. How was it? A superficial question. You answer it, but nobody relates. You don't talk about it. Then you're left alone sometimes, sitting at home watching a movie, turn it off. You can't talk about it. You miss it. You feel like you don't have a purpose anymore because over there you had a purpose. On the trail, you have a purpose every day. And then now you don't. And some people can easily hear that and say, well, go back to work. There's your purpose. It's still not the same because the camaraderie that you have with your employees is not the same as you had with hikers who are all on the same.
And the same suck.
Same adventure, same suck. That's right.
Yep. So did you journal while you were on the trail?
I don't journal. I do write though. So I enjoy writing. I wrote a blog article about the trail when it was done. So my process is I take photographs, I'll take notes, and my memory is very savvy, reflecting back on many moments. So I don't journal, to answer your question. That's kind of how my process was. And when I got back, I went out and spent a few days, almost a week, and I wrote this thing out.
Yeah. No, I was just asking because I know a lot of people, I don't journal either, but a lot of people advocate for journaling. And I could see myself wanting to write down every, if, I'm not going to say if, I'm going to say when, because it's going to happen at some point. Jason already talked about it. I'm not going to say it out loud yet, but when I put myself through something like that, I can see myself wanting to write down every experience and like write down every thought. Like you just sit down at the end of the day, reflect on the day, talk about the things that happened that day. I could see where reading back on that would be really amazing. And the reason I brought that up is because I'm just so curious. Like I'm really, really curious about how you handled because whenever you're walking, some days you're going to have good days and some days you're going to think about all the mistakes that you've ever made in your life. Was that a thing?
It sounds like you were with me.
Yeah. I mean,
on that. That's exactly what goes through your mind. Yes.
Yeah. So some days you're like, man, like the day at the waterfall, man, this is beautiful. This is amazing. But 2 days before that, it might have been overcast and rainy.
His brain was in the gutter.
Yeah, and you're going back to, I don't want to dig too hard unless, you're comfortable with it. But
comfortable with it.
You go right back to like what caused a divorce. You know what I mean? And you have to have those thoughts because you're alone. You're by yourself. So you're walking and you're thinking about mistakes that you've made, thinking about things you wish you would have done different, things you wish you would have done better. Yeah. And you just got to sit there and wallow in that until those thoughts are processed in your body and your brain. And then you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and then eventually that stuff gets behind you and you get to this waterfall moment. I mean, that's like the meaning. I have chills now. It's like the meaning of life. You know what I mean? Just facing those things that have put you in negative positions in your life, and then just taking the next step and taking the next step and taking the next step until you get to that aha moment.
That's exactly right. And you're right. I've thought those things numerous times, and this kind of came to me where we always mention, when you mention like mistakes you've made, there's a difference between a mistake and a poor choice.
Right.
And I've made some poor choices in my life in many situations, personally and professionally, and someone to go, it's okay, everyone makes mistakes. But I've learned, and this came to me on the trail too, where I'm like, yeah, that wasn't a mistake. A mistake is usually a good intention that goes bad. So there's a fork in the road. I'm going to go left or right. I made a mistake. I went on the left fork. I should have gone right. Good intentions, right? A bad choice is when you know the consequences, you know it's wrong, you know that you shouldn't do something, but you make the choice anyway. That's a poor choice. So there's a huge difference between a mistake and a choice.
Absolutely right.
That's a very valuable lesson for people to understand.
You hear it all the time.
Myself included. Yeah.
You hear it all the time.
Nick Torito at Area Home Lending, Louisiana's top choice for mortgages. If you're looking to buy, build, or refinance, they have you covered. Don't get fooled by one of those online or out-of-state banks. Nick and Area Home Lending are Louisiana-based and lend in all of Louisiana. From Lake Charles to Lafayette or all of Baton Rouge to New Orleans. If it's in this state, Nick and his team are local experts and ready to help. Your home is one of the biggest decisions and investments you will make in your life. With trust, commitment, and care, Nick will walk you through the process, step by step, making the hardest decision easy and ensuring the process is as simple and painless as possible. And with Nick, you'll find out that you're not only just another transaction or number on the list. He's invested in you and you become family with his goal to create a relationship that will always be there. Area Home Lending has access to the best loan programs too, and with the lowest rate and fees, all while delivering exceptional customer service. Please give him a call today at 225-663-2500 or visit him on the web at www.areahomelending.com. I guarantee you, he will take great care of you. Nick Torito and Area Home Lending, a proud sponsor of Hustle Makes It Happen, the podcast. I want to tie something together because I've been more cognizant of it lately. You talked about PTSD.
Yeah.
And you talked about it after the trail.
Right.
You're going through this, feeling that you weren't feeling. You were feeling it for 6 months, and then you get there, and it's like,
oh, yeah.
You were also in the military for 22 years, right? So you've been through and you've seen things. How does that relate? Does it, as a veteran myself that has been deployed, overseas as well, I've become more cognizant in the last 3 years about talking to veterans and being vulnerable with them.
Sure.
Because what you said, and it made me link it, is the camaraderie. You didn't have to be on the same deployment to know
That's right.
what they had been through or some of the things that they felt being away from their family, being in a war zone, do you find yourself almost being attached to that feeling again, like going through something really tough and then having the camaraderie of a group of people and then and then the back end too? Like, do you feel like there's a commonality between that from your
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You said it well. Everyone's different in how they deal with trauma, right? Whether it's trauma from combat or whether it's trauma from a depression you might have had from a memory in your past, in your childhood, whatever it might be, an automobile accident that you witnessed, whatever it might be. Everyone's different. I've met veterans. I have so many friends that are veterans, right? That followed me even on the trail. In fact, one of my goals is to do another adventure in the future and bring some of my former Marines that served with me on the trail.
You pulled it out of my head. That was real. That was literally going to be something that I was going to ask you.
Yeah, it's a goal of mine.
Yeah.
That's a goal of mine. In fact, there's a few guys I reached out to a few years back, and I said, hey, here's what I'm contemplating doing. Just an example. The John Muir Trail in California is about 241 miles. I'm off a few miles, but something like that. Take about 2 weeks to do. I had written a proposition to Netflix and said, here I am. Here's what I do. Here's a background of what I've experienced. Here's how I travel. I want to take a group of Marines that served with me at different ranks and ages that have had post-traumatic stress, have been physically wounded, and I want to put together a 2-week expedition to do the John Muir Trail, and I want it to be captured and then do interviews with them and talk about how it's therapeutic. Because I know it works for me when I'm outdoors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, I didn't hear anything back, but I did submit it. I still think the theory is sound to do something like that. And it's been done on other platforms. But I felt that I would bring something different to it, of course, because of my experience with travel and therapy after I retired from the Marine Corps and then bringing people that I knew. And there's some people that I do know that have something similar in Montana where they bring veterans to go fly fishing and do some small hikes, and it's very helpful. But they failed the first time they did it. The reason they failed, and this goes to camaraderie, they grabbed Marines and soldiers that didn't know each other and brought them out there for 4 days, and it became a dick measuring contest. Everybody was fighting and talking about who did what better and who had more experiences, and so the camaraderie wasn't there because it didn't exist between them already. The next time they did it, they grabbed Marines that had served together in the same unit and went through the same experiences and misery. And then they got back together after had seen each other for 10 years. And it was a wonderful experience. And they've constantly repeated that theme with soldiers, Marines, sailors. Well, maybe not sailors. I don't know. Sailors don't really have PTSD, I don't think.
Oh, man.
Oh, well, are you guys Navy?
I was.
Oh, man. You know, that was my Marine jab at the sailors. I had to get it in there. I didn't know that, so I thought I'd just test it for a minute.
Oh, you're good, man.
It's all right. It's all right, shipmate. I got it.
It's all good. No, you're good, man. That's part of the camaraderie.
That's
right?
exactly right.
That's
yes.
right.
Little inter branch rivalry.
That's right.
That's true. It is.
Especially between the Navy and the Marine Corps.
Well, I mean, we spent most of my friends' family know that the 5 years that I spent in the military was with the Navy, but I never touched a boat a day in my life.
Yeah,
really.
My dad was in the Navy. He always said that the Marine Corps was the women's branch of the Navy.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just what he said. I don't have any experience with the Navy.
That's a compliment, man. I know some tough Marines that are women
Hey, no doubt. That ain't no doubt.
that kick anybody's ass.
Oh, man.
And I don't say that to try to get like an applause here.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
Look, man.
Oh, it's a fact.
Oh yeah.
I think that
Combat veterans, wounded, serving
yeah.
on the front line. It ain't like it used to be.
That's right.
I really like that you're talking about, but to bring anybody, veteran or not, civilian, you have to have some point of, you have to want to grow on that journey.
Yeah.
You have to have that in you.
That's right.
You're going to have to want to look at those individuals and you as maybe the leader of that expedition that you'd be bringing 5 or 6 guys on, whether they're inner unit or not. Yeah. They have to be ready to grow.
That's right.
Mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and they have to be ready for that. Because I imagine even in a 2-week span, with the failures that come along those trails and all those little clarity moments, because you stretched yours out over 6 months, and all the other hikes and things that you've done.
Sure.
But somebody that hasn't done one like that, right? Because I've gone on day hikes and things like that. But when you're going through 2 weeks, people need to think about today and then fast forward 2 weeks, how much time and effort and thoughts process go into that. And man, I really hope that you do that. I hope that you get that going.
Appreciate that. It's a goal of mine for sure.
Because I think it would bring just some great things in people's lives.
I'd like to support that too if we can somehow. Even if it's just showing face or talking about it or whatever, getting word out. I'd definitely like to.
Thank you. Yeah, it'd be great. Way. I've got plenty of ideas that I'm kind of working on with the future and starting small with that. And there's so many people that I know that serve that are willing to do it, want to do it, and it's a calling. And, not to digress back to the question you asked with journaling, it kind of ties into this because that's kind of where I came up with the idea. So I tried to journal in combat at one point. Mm-hmm. I failed miserably. And then I hiked Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa in 2014, and I tried to journal that. And what I felt like every night is I was forcing myself to write things I didn't really want to write about. Mm-hmm. It didn't come like organic. But then after a few days would go by and I'd go look at my photographs, I would annotate, oh, this is a feeling I had when I look at a picture. Oh, that's when I turned here and I almost fell down, or I climbed this rock and I had to take my pack off and pulled it up with a rope. Then I would write about it. I felt like reliving it. But in that moment, by not journaling and learning my method of how I write is how I came up with the idea of I need to grab some veterans that don't have the chance to travel like I do from where I live at this point, and maybe take them out there and the therapy and,
Yeah, I think that 2 week, time span too is
perfect.
It's right there on that cusp of being able to have some self-realization through that process. But people that don't have the ability and freedom to go do a month long, or I think about right now what it would be like to take a month off of anything. One, I know, feels exhilarating to even think that. But I also know with kids and babies and wives and businesses, and I know that I'm like, man, that'd be rough. It'd be rough on the back end.
Yeah, take a lot of planning on the front end, and it'd be real tough on the back end.
Life gets in the way, man.
Yeah.
I want to back up a little bit there. You said, because Chase said something a while ago that made me kind of question or want to challenge some stuff that we talked about a while ago. You said that there was whenever you started the Appalachian Trail, there was no real end goal, right? There was no real outcome. I think there was. I want to challenge the fact that there was an outcome, even if the outcome was to just see if you could do it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, there was. So
I wanted to brag, okay, that I finished it just to put me on the spot. I wanted to brag and tell people I did the Appalachian Trail and you didn't. That's what the goal was.
But and the reason I wanted to go back to that
There
is
are people
because
listening that are going to be like, he's telling the truth. I know him. He's an arrogant prick.
that's the secret. No, the reason I wanted to bring that up is because sometimes it goes back to this like motivation versus inspiration versus discipline
That's right.
premise that a lot of people that are in the self-development space kind of struggle with. Your motivation was to just see if you could do it, right? That motivation probably wore off after a couple of days, and now you're in the middle of the trail and you're like, damn, I'm kind of stuck here. I can either go back and quit or I can get to the end. And now you've got the inspiration and I guess you got the discipline to keep going forward instead of getting off at the next little town and going back home.
Yes.
You had to add some discipline to get out of bed and actually walk back to the trail and continue on.
You were right
But then
on the money.
you catch these moments of inspiration.
Yes.
And that was the real fuel, I think. Like the motivation got you started, the discipline got you back on the trail whenever it was hard, but the inspiration is what really over time, because there was no inspiration at the beginning, I wouldn't imagine. Maybe there was a little bit, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. I would imagine the inspiration came whenever you get to the peak, right? We talk about the peaks and the valleys a lot.
Yeah.
You get to the peak and you get this moment of inspiration, and that gets you down kind of into the next valley, if you will. Sure. And then the discipline is what gets you from the valley back to the peak where the inspiration lives. The motivation just got you started.
Justin, you're right on the money. I would say, though, I was inspired at the beginning because that's why I decided to do the trail. I found inspiration knowing that it would be a challenge for me. But you're right. And what you described with the motivation at the beginning is like that cup of coffee I talked about. Mm-hmm. The caffeine only lasts so long, and then it dies off. And how do you get beyond that through your discipline? You find inspiration somehow. And, of course, I wanted to finish the trail knowing I would climb Mount Katahdin in Maine. And I comment on that quite a bit. If you've ever watched the Lord of the Ring movies or The Hobbit or read the books, Mordor is the mountain they're getting to drop the ring off, right? As cliche as that sounds to talk about that, that's what it kind of felt like to me when I finally saw that mountain. Like this long journey is about to come to an end. And that was the end goal. But where I didn't have a goal was what happened afterwards. Other than having the experience and what I would do next, I found myself in this mental purgatory. And that's where the depression hit, you know.
Did you cry when you got to the top of that mountain?
Are
you emotional like that?
I got emotional. I didn't cry. And the reason I hesitate is like people's definition of cry.
Yeah, right.
I wasn't
like
bawling.
Up, yeah, like
right. But emotional, eyes watering.
Yeah.
Oh, and feeling it. Oh, yeah. No doubt about it, man.
People might be like, why do you ask that? Because I think we can ask that. Like,
of course.
I mean, that you just put yourself through 6 months of peaks and valleys, and then to see it and get to the top and go, I mean, I'd be very emotional.
It was freezing cold and hurricane force winds at the top of Mount Katahdin when I summited, and it definitely looked like I was crying from that just alone.
Right.
But I definitely was emotional. It was such a powerful feeling, you know. And then you get to the highest high at the top of the summit, and then you have to go down knowing it's over, and then you lose like your adrenaline, you lose your excitement, and you know. Any time you talk to a hiker or a mountain climber, anyone that climbs to the top of something, that's the highest high. And then coming back down is like this miserable, like, oh, I can't believe I have to do this. And that's how I felt climbing down the mountain, because you had like 3-hour hike, climbing and scrambling through rocks to get down. And you just came off this high. And now you're like, oh my God, I got to go 3 hours.
It's like the what next depression.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, that is the perfect, like this experience. This is why this conversation is so profound to me, is this experience is like the perfect metaphor for life. You know what I mean? That experience is like, that is life, right? You get started, and once you get started, you don't really know what you're doing. You're figuring it out. It's a new experience. So you might have some, you know, I guess this is where it differs from life, is that you've already got some hiking experience, but you don't, I mean, if you've never hiked that trail, you don't know that trail, right? So you're fumbling your way through it, and you're getting these moments of inspiration and these moments of motivation and these moments of clarity and these moments of overwhelming sadness and these highs and these lows. And then you get to the end and it's done, right?
Lessons, yeah.
So, but what's important there is that you enjoy that journey. You know what I mean? Right. Man, it's such a good analogy and like on the ground physical representation of the life experience.
And all the experience that I had previous to this, I hadn't gone more than 14 days on a backpacking trip, which 2 weeks is a long time. I would take 2 weeks off of work, which all I had to do was 2 weeks and go back to work. And that's a long time, but not 6 months. So even though I thought I knew what I was doing, 2 months into it, I started changing some of my gear, getting rid of things, lightening my load, or adding something I didn't have before that I didn't expect. And you're right, you're figuring out along the way. Lessons learned.
Man, that experience is the perfect analogy for life. And that's what I think is so profound about it.
It is. So I think you guys checked out my blog, jpcadventures.com. That came about, and I wrote about the Appalachian Trail. I wrote the entire article and story about my journey and my experience from the preparation phase until the end. Well, the funny thing about that blog, and I enjoy writing, I didn't write these stories with the intention to have a blog. But when COVID hit, like everyone around the world, I was in quarantine for a while, and I was living in Dubai. And you can only watch Netflix and work out so much in a day, right?
Yeah.
And I said, I got to come up with something. And I never made a website. I created a website, Googled it, figured it out, and said, I'm going to write 2 stories about travel experiences. And then I have like 24 now because it was my project through the quarantine and the COVID. So as much as we all hated the pandemic, there were some things that came out of it that were positive for everybody, I'm sure.
And I've been through your
That was
website.
a plug for my website, by the way.
Well, so I'd like you to do a little bit more on that. So I dove through his website this weekend a good bit, just reading some of your past articles too. One, it's a great roadmap for people that do want to get out there and adventure. Katie Benton Thompson is your local trusted realtor. Born and bred in real estate as a third-generation realtor, she deals with developments from lots and to houses. Katie was raised building the parish of Livingston. Her family roots have grown this parish for the last 30 years. This environment has educated Katie in all areas of real estate. I can tell you from personal experience, Katie Benton Thompson is a hustler in every way. She is constantly digging her heels in to give her clients the best buying or selling experience she can. Give Mandy Benton Realty Group a call and ask for Katie Benton Thompson at 225-953-0677. I'd like you to plug your YouTube channel and also your website as well. You can give that
Social channels, all that.
And
please.
Before you get to that, mention that we are going to link your blog and all that stuff.
Yeah,
the description, the video.
I got
audio.
it.
Appreciate it.
Let me start that over then.
Thanks, Jim.
That's fine.
Yeah, boom. So I do want you to go a little bit further with that though. So we will be linking all of your channels, your YouTube page, your website. That's all going to be in our content as well when we air your show.
Thank you.
But I'd like you to give a shout out to your YouTube channel and also your website as well to our viewers if they want to check out jpcadventures.com.
Thanks, Chase. I appreciate it. I don't need to say any more. You said it all right there. And my name, Paul Corville, is the YouTube channel. That's it. I mean, very simple, right?
Yep.
And I documented the trail on YouTube. Usually every 2 to 3 weeks, I would put some video together to showcase what I had been through. And then with the intention, when I wrote an article about it, I would embed the videos inside my article so that when you're reading about it, there's a video that corresponds with the story. And that's how I came up with that article. And with that blog and with the website, jpcadventures.com, we talked earlier about when I was 13 and I watched these movies with Sylvester Stallone, right? That was 1985 when I saw those films, right? And changed my life. 20 years later, literally 20 years later, which doesn't seem long now, but at the time, I was in Las Vegas in 2005, and they were filming Rocky Balboa. And I got to be an extra in the movie, sitting in the crowd during the fight scenes.
Oh, that's cool.
That's awesome, man. It's full circle.
And I got a chance to meet him in person that day.
Did you tell him the story?
I did. And he was very humble. He was very sweet to me. His brother, Frank Stallone, is the reason I got a chance to meet him because he was directing and he was not interacting with the extras.
Yeah.
But because I struck up a conversation with his brother, Frank, we talked for like 30 minutes about, I just come back from Fallujah when it was really bad at the time in 2004. And he brought me over to introduce me to his brother, Sylvester Stallone. And I did tell him that story. And I had known a lot about him because when he was 13, he was a skinny kid with a speech impediment because half of his face is paralyzed when he was born. And he saw a movie called Hercules Unchained with Steve Reeves, and it changed his life, and he started lifting weights to get bigger. And I'm like, I was 13, overweight, saw you in the film, and then I changed my life.
That's cool.
And he was very humble. He talked to me for like 15 minutes and was just very genuine. Took a photograph with me. We didn't have phones with cameras back then. His assistant took a picture with the old wind-up camera,
Yeah.
and they mailed it to me with an autograph.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then I did an Arnold Schwarzenegger impression for him, and he laughed at that. And he thought that was pretty good. I do a pretty good Schwarzenegger impression.
Well, let's hear it.
You got to hear it.
It might be on my YouTube channel, but let's see, where can I go with this? This is a fantastic podcast here. My biceps are growing right there, and I'm going to go run for the president, and then going to swipe it here. Sylvester Stallone's fantastic. What is this, right? The Democrats really don't hang out in Denham Springs because we're more Republican, because you have to earn it. And when you earn it, you don't burn it. I just made that up, actually.
Oh,
That's
dude,
awesome.
you're a man of many talents, JP. I love it.
No, JP, I definitely appreciate you coming to share your story with us, man. And we're going to be, I guarantee you, we're going to be following along. We're going to be watching everything, every step. I'm glad that we got to dig into your experiences and talk about some of the things that have made you successful and made you, live such a fulfilled and purposeful life. So thank you for sharing that with us, for sure.
Thanks, Justin. I appreciate that. And Chase, I will tell you, I try not to be egotistical, and I think a lot of people, and I'll use myself as an example, I get accused a lot of times of having an ego or being arrogant, and everyone has insecurities. So I shared the insecurities I had when I was a young teenager, shy and overweight. And once you overcome those, and it takes a while, like I said, I didn't really blossom until 25 and older, you want to be who you've turned into and showcase it and be proud of the things that you've grown and progressed through some insecurity that you might have. And every time I meet someone that has a great piece of advice or they seem humble, I usually look at that person now and go, they've struggled somewhere in life. The reason they are the way they are now, and they're so humble, they listen, they're contrite, they give great advice. They struggled and they probably went through something in their life that I don't know about yet. Usually the people that are like loud and aggressive and don't know what they're talking about and use sound bites all the time, I feel like those people probably didn't struggle. Not everyone, but that's been my experience.
Yeah.
When I deal with certain people and individuals.
For sure, man.
No doubt about it.
I can definitely relate to that.
You guys know who Deion Sanders is, right? Coach Prime. Now he said something a few weeks ago on social media that I thought was fantastic. He literally said, "Don't allow my confidence to insult." Let me see. I might want to say that over.
It's
Boom. Isn't that what you said?
Yeah.
Boom. Right. Let me think of what he said. Oh, yeah. So Deion Sanders said on social media a few weeks ago, and I thought this was profound. He said, "Don't allow my confidence to offend your insecurities." And even after he said it, he goes, "Get something out to write with, because this is going to be profound, so write it down." And I think that it was so powerful and so strong.
It's true.
Because he's one of those guys that when he played football, people thought he was an arrogant guy and he had an ego and he was all about himself. But the older he's gotten, and you hear the things that he says and the quotes he makes and how he talks to his players, you can see he's trying to build unity and camaraderie.
Oh, there ain't no
and
doubt.
his teammates said that that's the kind of person he was.
Dude, he's causing ripples in the system,
Absolutely.
and I love it.
I do too.
I love every second. I love people that cause ripples like that, because it's not the same.
That's right.
He's coming in, he's changing things.
The only thing I didn't like about Deion is he played for the Atlanta Falcons
Right.
when he first got drafted. And every time the Saints played him, we were like, oh, my God, we know this is going to be an ugly day.
That's right. Well, good, man. So the one thing I do want to get off, if you get into the space, and I don't even know if you're there because we didn't touch on it, but if you're in the space of bringing groups, maybe not direct veterans as well, but like if you have small companies and it's 3, 4, 5 employees, and you're going out and you're going to do these smaller trips or trails, and you get into that space, let me know about that.
Oh, man, you're definitely invited, for sure.
So, because there's 3 of us that own our other company, and I think the bonding that would happen in moments like that would be something that we would take for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, and I actually know other people that have smaller companies that I think would be interested
Sure.
Yeah.
in that stuff. So
Anyways. That's a great concept. In fact, I lived in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I was stationed at Quantico as a Marine at one point, and I stumbled across a gentleman that kind of asked for team building with his Capital One employees. And I went to Capital One for a full day, and it wasn't hiking, but I put them through some physical tests and some military type of arrangements, and they drank it like Kool-Aid, man. It was the best thing that they'd ever experienced. And I still hear from some of those people today.
If everybody doesn't know, and we didn't bring it up in the beginning of the podcast, I know we're about to wrap up, but JP was also referred to us through a family member of mine. But it tells you the power when someone listens and they know the lane that you're in and they think of someone. So my family member, Tim, thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
He thought of our show. He's listened to our show, and he said, JP is a perfect fit for this type of podcast and this getting his mentality and what he's been through out in the world. And this was a great show. Mm-hmm. Thank you for coming on and talking life, man, and shop, because this is what it's about.
Thank you, Chase and Justin.
Definitely appreciate
it. That's it, brother.
That's it, babe.
All right. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt, guys. That's it, man. It's another episode of Hustle Makes It Happen, the podcast. I'm not going to drag it out. You guys know the routine. Continue to share the content. We talked about that already. So thanks for everything you've done for us. Until next time, keep your head down, keep your eye on the ball. Remember, hustle makes it happen. But most importantly, have fun. Later.